Hi there, this is Anirvan. Welcome to the next episode of Anirvan in Conversation with an Industry Expert. One of the biggest challenges that enterprises face today is the documentation of processes or lack thereof. This causes huge problems, especially in terms of transformation, mergers and acquisitions, and ERP implementation. Especially in the digital age that we live in, we also have other elements that needs to be taken into consideration. Things like metadata and other parts which need to be integrated with the documentation. In order to address this, a couple of years back, an innovative solution called elements.cloud was invented. And one of the evangelists of this particular solution is Walter Bril, who is joining us today as our guest. So let me welcome Walter. Walter, hi.
Hey, Anirvan, nice to meet you again. I mean, it was also a couple of years, ago that we actually first time met each other. I still remember on a sunny day in Vught somewhere. I'm very happy to be present here, and then let's just see what happens.
Excellent. Thanks, Walter. Thanks for joining us. So let's start with a brief introduction of who you are and what you do, and how do you come about becoming an evangelist for this particular solution?
Yeah, well, the evangelist part, I can start with that. I have been an evangelist for, if you look at the method we use, for more than 25 years. So my blood is all about process management. But if you look at my LinkedIn profile, you will read something which says process knowledge management. And with that, I mean the retaining of knowledge in your organization. Because when people leave, many times, knowledge leaves as well. So that's the evangelist part. And actually this is like before, I was going to say before the Second World War, but that's not true, of course. No, before 1999, so this is a long time ago, I met already the founders of elements.cloud, and the company they established at that time was called Nimbus, and they had pretty much the same vision already at that time, but as you can imagine, it was not in the cloud. It was very focused on processes only. So you already mentioned metadata synchronization and all that. So this was pretty the early stage of what we have now. And I mean, that has been like 25 years ago, if not longer. And now we are in the cloud. We are very focused. Obviously, technology has developed as well. So all these components together makes that we actually now are thriving in this area. Yeah.
So for the benefit of viewers, why don't we share a bit of example of what elements.cloud is?
Basically, elements.cloud is a platform. It's a cloud-based platform that has the sole purpose of documenting your org. So when I talk to Salesforce people, they immediately will understand what I mean with that. But if you're not Salesforce related, I can explain that a little bit. So as you said in the beginning, in the introduction, the documentation of your process is one thing, but if nobody uses or reads documentation, why bother? Why would you actually spend any energy on that? That doesn't go anywhere. So basically, what we thought was very helpful is not just to document your processes, but also to make them practical. So practical in daily use. So for example, if you are sitting behind a screen, it would be really helpful to see the context of what you are doing right there on the screen, online, current, so not looking at the past. So you have all the information at your fingertips. So that's one thing. If you look at the other thing, that's the analysis part. So I'm actually a green belt. So I'm very much into the lean scene and all that. It makes a lot of sense that actually when you receive feedback and requirements from the organization to also be able to actually document it as well. And Elements.cloud does this as well. So actually it's a combination of documentation and a very powerful analysis, and then especially in the Salesforce area. Yeah.
Help us understand a bit more about the benefits that organizations may get by engaging Elements.
Yeah, the benefit is actually quite straightforward. It doesn't really matter what you implement, but let's just stick with Salesforce for a moment. So if you implement Salesforce, it's great because it's a very flexible platform. You can do a lot with it. But over time, you will generate technical debt. So, things will work in the beginning, which is fine, but then things change and we add stuff, add more stuff, add more stuff, add more stuff. And then the administrator is leaving the company, and it is the org is basically left alone or inherited by somebody else. And then you can already imagine what happens. So the knowledge has gone, but the remains are still there, which is the org. So now you are in a situation where you actually don't dare to touch things, because if you delete this field or if you delete that flow, what will happen? You don't know. So basically, that's the very first thing I would think of when you think about elements.cloud. So elements.cloud is not a magic pill. You have to do something, but it actually helps you to analyze your metadata, see what's connected, what's aligned. You immediately have a good view of your org health status, I would almost say. And that is an immediate benefit. Now, the long-term benefit is more that you start documenting. It's like going to the gym. You know, there's no magic pill. You will not just lose weight instantly. So you have to gradually, adapt to a new way of looking at your information, at your org. But that's what the English actually say, you can't boil the ocean. So you have to do it gradually. And Element is excellent for that, because it sits there, it gradually gains, I would say, added value. It would gradually add value to your business. And then, if something happens, if the market changes, or if the technology changes, or if whatever changes, you are in way better control than if you would not use, a platform like Elements. Now you could say, but I can do this in PowerPoint or in Excel. But these are typical examples of packages in isolation, right? They sit over here, and here's your org, right? And there's always a disconnect. Now, we don't have that disconnect because elements.cloud and Salesforce in this case are tightly integrated with each other. So if anything changes on the Salesforce side, we will see it.
So it's like an active repository of process documentation, of analysis, metadata, put together with the contextual knowledge being put in place.
Yes, it's well, you mentioned already a very important word, which is called context. So we definitely add context to your org. So, why did we develop this flow? Why did we develop this Apex code? Why did we, whatever you develop? And again, it's not a magic pill, so you have to do something. So it will not rule out admins. You always need admins, but admins will have a very powerful tool at their hands. That actually sits there in the cloud, as you said, and is always available. You have always the control. It's almost like a dashboard on your org, what's going on. So, for example, a little example, if somebody storms your office on Monday morning and says, we need this new flow or we need this new report, then you can say, well, if you would not use Elements, for example, then you go like, yeah, let's just do that because I have to help this guy. But you don't know what will happen if you, change this field or this pick list or this flow. You just don't know. Now with Elements, you can run a query, and then it will show you, well, if you touch this, these things will fall over, or these things will be in danger. So you are way more in control on what's going to happen. And if you then also add your process documentation, because you need to do that, but it is highly recommended, of course. Then you can even say, well, actually, that flow we don't need because we have a similar flow, which is on that side, and we might want to reuse that flow on that other side. And then you have something to talk about. And you talk about the same thing because it's all centralized.
Let's look at an organization. Typically, you and I, we both know that documentation is something where in most organizations has always been an afterthought, even though the intent is always there to have the documentation, but it's always an afterthought. Now we're talking about a solution which is based on cloud. What are some of the compelling reasons that you've seen that has made the organization adopt the solution?
Right. Well, funny you ask, because we have currently with this crisis going on, we have a lot of people who work from home, right? So a lot of admins work from home, and because of that, we actually started with an initiative called MIME, and you can actually look on our website what it is. But it comes down on take a very small set of measures with maximum impact. So basically, it comes down to it's basically a showcase to show, okay, if you would go with Elements, how much time does it take to actually take all the low-hanging fruit? And I give you an example here. For example, you can run a report to see where you have fields that are not used or never ever used. So you can clean up your fields already as you go. So your record pages will become faster, for example. Now, I'm not a Salesforce expert, so if there's any admins looking and saying, no, that's not true. We have other people who can help you there. But the thing is, you can already start, boiling the ocean, I would almost say, because you will have an immediate impact on that aspect of this of the configuration of your org.
What are some of the challenges that you face when you try and convince the stakeholders? What are the things that they push back on?
Yeah, that's a good question. The first thing you would see if you would start with elements, most people will see process maps. They will see diagrams, and then immediately the second thought they have is, oh yeah, yet another drawing tool in the cloud or something, and there's a lot of stuff available already. So why would I actually bother? So you immediately would run into those sort of first encounter situations where you say, oh yeah, that's a diagram. We already do that. But here's the thing, and I'm trying to when I talk to people, to show them two sides. So the first thing is, yes, of course, you need context. So yes, you need to document your processes, and we use a very, very lightweight and very easy to use language or notation. We call this a universal process notation, which comes down. We have only flow lines and boxes. That's basically what we have, and we don't have those complicated symbols. So when you look at such a diagram, it is actually already easier to read than when you would look at any other notation. So that's an important thing. But then again, you would have only a drawing. You would look at the process. You would go like, yeah, that's a process. But now here's the practical side. And this actually recalls me. This is many years ago when I actually did a job, and I wasn't with Elements at the time, but I was a process consultant, and an account manager came to me and said, "Listen, Walter, you and your process maps, I don't need them. Do you have something more practical for me?" And then I asked him, "So what do you need?" And that's obviously the right question to ask. What do you need? So he went like, if you could guarantee me the right price lists, every month, that would be really helpful. So if I guarantee you the right information, the right price list, then you would be a happy person. And he went like, yes, that would be really helpful. So what I did basically is I combined the process diagrams with related information. And one of the related information artifacts was obviously the price list, which was kept up to date all the time. So I sort of tackled two things in the same time. I made a very practical use of this issue. So I made sure that the price list was, of course, up to date. And the price list was also in the context of the process, right? So, and that actually you see all the time with Elements as well, by the way. You can see here's a process, but here's actually the in this case, the Salesforce org node that relates to that business process. For example, it could be an activity, and the activity says something like set status. Now, then obviously you would somewhere in the system, you would have a status field, for example. And you can actually combine these two real time. So you can immediately see that actually, when you run a report, we use this set status routine, say, here and there and there and there. Well, why do we use it over here? That's really interesting. You would never be able to do that when you would have just a drawing, or PowerPoint, or and that makes, I think, a very unique selling point amongst other things, by the way.
Yeah, I think that flexibility is one of the features of the solution that you provide. Now, typically when you work with organizations, I'm assuming there are a lot of different people from different departments who get involved. I'm sure IT guys probably get definitely involved. What are the other departments or functions that needs to be involved for a solution like this?
Okay, now a lot is about change management, and so there's always a danger when you talk process or talk process diagrams. You will end up very quickly on the technical side. Now we try to address the whole cycle. So you can, like I said in the beginning, you can document anything, but if nobody reads the documentation, why bother? So change management is part of it. So in the tool, in the platform, we have a mechanism that actually helps you as an end user to get feedback. So you can actually, when you look at the field, so you are in the operations and you just go like, I just don't understand this pick list. I don't understand why I would fill this in anyway. But there's then this little, we call this the little purple eyes. In Salesforce, you have those information items, which actually you can click on or hover over and you will see some help text, but we have extended that. So when you click on it, it will show you useful help. Well, that is actually the idea, but also the ability to, to issue feedback. So you can actually, you said this was really helpful or this was not very helpful. So thumbs down. So we can actually measure, people are looking at the documentation. They find it yes or no, not helpful. They can also issue feedback. So if they go like, I have an idea, this could be better, they can immediately issue feedback. Now this feedback is captured obviously on the cloud, in the tool. And based on that feedback, you can then start a new requirement or a user story or what have you. And the beauty of this whole thing is it's all centralized. So you immediately see, okay, we changed this in this area and there was a lot of feedback. People were not very happy. So we need to change that. Now, obviously you could say, yeah, but we could have a meeting. We can actually talk about this. Of course, you would also talk about that, but you are at least are looking at the same thing. So rather than translating your pains into a PowerPoint, you have direct pain visible in the tool, in the operations, right? So you don't have this translation issue of, okay, or assumptions, or we think this doesn't really work very well, or this is not the right context, but it is already there. The context is already there. And that makes an enormous difference. And that makes it also very powerful. So when you're talking about stuff, you're talking about the right stuff.
And your solution is based on cloud. Can the solution be used by multiple parties, especially in, let's say, blockchain kind of solutions?
Yes, there's actually already a company, I forgot his name, but they are doing stuff with blockchain, and they basically focus on the notation. So funny enough, we always ask why. So in my tutorships, when I work for economics, as you know, I also always address the why question, right? So it's not a matter of just automation. The biggest question you need to ask is the why question. So they really enjoyed to see the way we actually describe processes. So for example, I will just give you a very simple example. If you would have an activity called archive document, now typically in 9 out of 10 times, people will answer that question, that output with archived document, which is true because it's a status. So you archive the document, therefore you have an archived document, okay? We say, oh, no, it's not wrong, but we want to add more value. So we will say something like archive document. Why do you do that? And if they cannot answer that question, then we say, then we don't have to do that. And then they go, no, if we don't do that, we cannot find our documents back. Oh, so your searchability or your findability of your documents is then ensured. Well, that makes sense. Or maybe you need to comply to certain law. And then suddenly they go like, oh yeah, that's actually why we do that. So this blockchain company, or any company basically, can now really focus on why they do stuff. So as you know, with blockchain, it's a matter of getting rid of a lot of intermediate functions. And the only way, in my opinion, the only way you can get rid of these is to ask the why question 1,000,000 times. Why do you do this? Can you justify what you're doing? No. In that case, we have to get rid of it. And then, of course, with blockchain technology, guess what? Then you can actually automate that. But there's a thing before the blockchain technology, and that's the asking of the why question, which always works. It doesn't really matter what you do. It could be blockchain initiatives, it could be any ERP or CRM system. That doesn't really matter. But that is all about the notation, which I think, I'm a process nerd. So in my opinion, this is a very important thing.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point that you highlighted, which is the notation and the why of something is being done, an initiative is being followed. So moving on, my next question would be, essentially, you mentioned about boiling the ocean, right? And there's a huge need for change management, which is how people have to change the way they have done the work in the past versus now. Your solution projects, are these like transformation projects, or are these like you start with a POC, small and nimble, and then you kind of scale up? What's the approach that when organizations are thinking about a solution like yours should take?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. In the beginning of Elements, as when we were still very small, it was a nice tool for admins, because it would save them. It would just save them time, right? So rather than spending a lot of time to do some detective work in your metadata, this tool would just help them to speed that up. So that's already a big win. So it would be a time saver. But as you go and grow, and now we are addressing enterprise solutions as well, then of course you get way more structural approaches. So for example, we at Elements, we always issue a trial. So you have a 14-day trial or longer, depends on how much time you need. So a proof of concept is always possible. And most of the time, the end solution is based on that trial period, right? Because people have to learn how this thing works. As I said, you will see in the beginning, oh yeah, there's a tree or there's a diagram, but they would not typically know the power, which is actually underneath all the beautiful things you can see. So it's under the hood. So basically, if you look at, we work a lot with, if not only with partners, because elements.cloud is actually a technology company. So we are in the cloud. We are all ex-consultants basically. So we know, we have way more than, well, together I don't know, but myself, I have like 25 plus years of experience in the process knowledge area. And also the founders have all that knowledge. So we know all about the consultancy challenges. And we do not typically want to hire consultants or to embed them in our organization. We want to focus on the technology. So basically, we are reliant on partners. So most of the time, we have a really great partner program, not typical referral program, but they really need to understand the philosophy and they need to understand the vision. And then they can go and knock themselves out with this tool set, basically. But again, it's very important to also understand the philosophy behind it. So that's what I would like to address, because it's not a matter of I would almost say a shrink-wrapped solution. That's very difficult to. I don't see that as that. It is more handmade. Okay, what kind of situation are you in? You mentioned change. If the whole idea is, hey, we have a Salesforce org that is not being used very well by our users, how could you help? Well, we could, for example, help with user adoption, which makes sense. The fact that you also have very powerful analysis and more of these kind of things is great. But then we would focus on adoption only. If you look at our website, we have actually a great graph which actually shows all these aspects. So there's a cycle. The only thing we do not do, and that's an important thing to mention, is implementation. So we don't push a button and then you implement change sets or what have you in Salesforce. There's many other tools who are much better than that. But we do all about the analysis, documentation, and user adoption part.
I guess it's more of an enabling tool rather than an end destination journey in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. So enabling, it is actually an ongoing thing. It is not what you see, and it is not just typically with elements. This is with most process management, say, projects. There's always a reason when people want to start mapping their processes. There's some change, technology change, or there's some business change, or the world is changing. Guess what? I mean, COVID-19 is now changing the way we actually go back to work. If you have an office, let me come to this later. But if you have an office, how do you go back? How does it work? So a lot of companies are now struggling with how to tackle that. Now, actually, typically, Salesforce obviously took a very great initiative. It's called work.com, and work.com is their way to actually help companies, getting back to work. Now, obviously, our name would not be Elements if you wouldn't jump on this as well. So we have mapped out all the processes that relate to work.com, and that is all to do with change, right? That's not so much technology, it is change, because we have suddenly to change our behavior. We have to change the way we, go to work or maybe stay at home. And that really makes a difference. So, I would almost say the tool was already there, but the fact that they initialized this work.com initiative is really great for us, because we can actually really show the power of change management in this context. Yeah.
Would you be able to share some of the experiences or feedback that you've got from your early customers or early adopters? What are they saying about the benefits they have seen so far? What are they saying about the solution?
Yes, I can. There's actually, and again, you can see a slight change in feedback. So in the beginning of Elements, you would see feedback in the form of, this is a great time saver, because it does a lot of analysis for me. It is really easy to analyze your orgs and everything. So that was really for admins. And as we are gradually going into the adoption and change management area, you will see now feedback that is more in the context of HR, for example, like how do people actually work? Do they actually benefit from what we have created? So it's not anymore the typical old-fashioned, okay, we build something and then we throw it over a wall and then we hope that users are are happy. It still happens, I guess. But with elements, you can actually align it very nicely. And that's actually the feedback we are getting now, because it is, oh, I didn't even know you could do that. You can actually, click on this and then there's some help, and oh man, there's context. And now I understand why I need to fill in this pick list. Now I understand why I need to do this. Because when I was a very young boy on school, we had obviously mathematics. And I hated it. Why? Because nobody told me what I could do with it. Right? I didn't see the added value of the whole thing. So there was a lot of theory. So therefore I was very bad at mathematics at the time. If you help people to understand why they need to do something, so they understand the context, then people suddenly become also more cooperative. They are more eager to change. They go like, yeah, I can see why I should do it. Okay, I now understand why I need to do this, or I now understand why you prepared it on this way. And I think if everybody works like that, then we have a better balance in organizations, because now we are not anymore like, oh, that's finance, oh, that's IT, oh, that's all these silo addresses. So now, obviously, if you talk about process, you shouldn't typically be siloed, but this actually emphasizes that much more. So using elements is actually, I wouldn't say a guarantee, but it is like, wow, now I can see actually transparency, I can see context, I can see everything, and that just helps me understanding the other parties, the other functions in my organization. So in that respect, yes, I think it makes a lot of difference.
Based on your expertise and experience in this space, what are some of the trends that you foresee in the near future?
Clear, I guess we are focusing on Salesforce, because I think Salesforce is an excellent example to elaborate on, to show people how this works. But already now, people are asking questions like, could you also please integrate with, SAP or anything else? Now, we are currently not doing that, but obviously I wouldn't be surprised if that's possible, because Elements runs on AWS. We obviously do have a so-called managed package for Salesforce. And it's totally focused on Salesforce. But it doesn't mean you could not use it for something else. So for example, the blockchain company is using it. They don't have Salesforce, but they are very happy to use all the functionality around it, because basically it's the same thing. Now, what I foresee where this is going to is a couple of things. So first things, this will be extended, that's for sure. I'm definitely sure that this will be extended. The second thing, and I would be really surprised if that's not going to happen, is that I think we might want to add more artificial intelligence to it, meaning data mining. So we have all that data, all that information about processes, right? Why wouldn't we exploit that in a nice way so that people can learn from it? It's already happening, for example, in a sort of manual way, but it still works for work.com. For example, we have created all these process maps, and we give them away for free. People need to register and they can join, and then they have all that information available, and they can copy it and then enjoy. So sharing information. So if you would define something that's really cool from a process point of view or from an implementation point of view, you could decide, hey, I want to share this with the world. And that's also the reason why we have, it's not called a market, but it's called a public space. So people can actually expose what they have to the public, and therefore other people can enjoy what others have invented. So we don't have to reinvent constantly the same thing, which I think is also a great time saver.
Yeah, I think that sharing of really clever part of your solution.
Very, very true. And I think that this is one example, but we have, well, obviously we can share as we go. So we have this infamous share icon also on our diagram. So when you go like, this is great stuff, I could share this with you, then you can just do this instantly. You don't have to do difficult things. Now, obviously, you will get an invitation to register for Elements. There's a commercial need there, but still you are sharing the same stuff. You're looking at the same stuff, and why would you reinvent it constantly? That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that will be greatly beneficial for many of the consultants, but also some of the large organizations with multiple business units where they can pretty much replicate with what they have. Now, coming to the last question, we always ask for some practical tips that you can share for our audience here.
Yeah. Practical tip, always start with asking the why question. That's what I would say, but that's a very easy question. You don't need Elements for that, of course. But from an elements.cloud perspective, What I would suggest, if you go like, hey, this is interesting, do have a look. I mean, register yourself. That's the most practical thing. You can always, and there's no cost involved here, you can always schedule a meeting with one of our team members, with me. If you're Dutch, you can even do it in Dutch. But the thing is, we want to share that information because we really believe that this way of sharing and this way of depicting process-related information, but also synchronizing with metadata, makes a lot of difference. So we are very, in case you didn't notice this yet, but we are very passionate about the results we have so far. And if you can go on with the practical tips, that's just basically, look us up. Register yourself, schedule a meeting, and then have a conversation. I mean, there's no cost involved. It will cost some time, but there's no cost involved. And then you can always go like, oh, this is cool, or maybe not. The other thing is, if you want to, if you are a consultant, you can, and you are in the process management area, or you are in the business analysis area, especially business analysis area, I would say, do look us up as well, because that makes a lot of sense as well. Especially from the notation perspective, I think this would be interesting to have a conversation. There's always nice discussions online with what notation is the best. I think you cannot ask that question. I think it is a matter of who's your audience. So if your audience is generic, which mostly is the case when you're talking to the whole business, then you need easy language. If your audience is very technical, then please go ahead, use BPMN or whatever. That's okay. That's not forbidden, but that's not a generic language or notation. So it depends very much who your audience is, and from there on we also addressed it. So we are very clear on who our audience is, and in this case, this is the generic business, I would say. And of course, the business analysts and admins. So that's basically what I could say to that.
Walter, you've got so much experience and expertise. I'm sure many of our members from the audience would like to continue the dialogue. What's the best way they can reach out to you?
Okay, yeah, that's easy. My first name is Walter, and I think this will be mentioned in the link as well. Walter at elements.cloud. That's my direct email. So elements.cloud is our domain. Obviously, I'm on LinkedIn, so if you go to LinkedIn and look me up, you can find me. That's easy enough. But I think these are the two ways. And if you want to go more generic, then you would go just to the website elements.cloud, which is, again, just elements.cloud. And then you'll find anybody who works there. But then you will also see the product. But I think the best thing to do is just to contact me. So we can have a conversation rather than just look at a brochure.
So this was the episode of Anirvan in Conversation with an Industry Expert, and today's guest was Walter Bril, one of the experts in the area of element.cloud. So on behalf of Fifth Chrome, I would like to thank Walter to take out the time and share your expertise here. Thank you so much, Walter.
It was a great pleasure, and I hope we meet ourselves again in the near future, but then more live rather than from a virtual setting.
Through this interview series, we try to create wide awareness of what's happening in the world of digital innovation. Every week, we try to bring in new concepts, new ideas, and this episode that you saw, which was on elements.cloud, was such an attempt. If you liked this interview and would like to watch more of these, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And for this particular episode, if you liked it, then please press the like button and share it with your friends, family, colleagues, network, whosoever you think can get value out of this conversation. Please do so. And with that, I would like to bring an end to the session today. I wish you all a very good day. Until next time, bye-bye.